Hi and welcome back to another video here on my channel UiPath with Jeppe. Today we are looking at the extraction activities in Document Understanding. And this is the video where really we get down to business and sort of pick out the data inside of the documents that we're trying to process. So let's just get to it. So we're inside Studio in this project that we've been building over the last few videos, and I just want to do a very quick recap. We have sort of 3 stages so far: an init stage. In the init stage, basically what we do here is we prompt the user for a file name, and that's the file that we want to process. Then we load our taxonomy that we defined in an earlier video, and we'll get back to that later in this video as well. Then in the Digitize phase, all we do is we use the Digitize document activity to extract the raw text from that document into a text variable and also into a document object model variable. And then what we did in the last video in the Classify section is we used a Classify document scope along with both the keyword-based classifier and the intelligent keyword classifier in order to determine what kind of document is it we're dealing with. And we saw that in the previous 2 videos. Also, what we did was we looked at the classification score that we achieved when classifying the document. And if the classification score was too low, we would present the classification station. And the classification station was this tool that would let the user assist the robot in making the correct classification. And by using the information from the classification station, we could feed information back into the classifier file by using the train classifier scope. And this way we could either make the very simple keyword-based classifier a little bit more confident in making its classifications, or we could make the intelligent keyword classifier better at actually making the correct classifications. And the distinction between these two I explained in the previous couple of videos, so go back and watch those if you need more information on that. So now we are at the point where we actually want to extract the information, or the specific information that we need in order to move along with our processing. So I'm just going to add another sequence to our little flow here. And we'll call that extract. Then I'll go to my toolbox and type in extract here so we can take a quick look at some of the extract activities. And what we have is a number of extractors. We have a form extractor, an intelligent form extractor, and also a regular expression-based extractor. And today we're using the form extractor. And I just want to mention that the intelligent form extractor is going to be deprecated. So I and UiPath do not recommend that you use this at all. Then we have a data extraction scope. We'll use that in just a second. And we also have an activity to export the extraction results. Then we have a train extractor scope, and we're not going to use that in this video, and I'll explain why a little bit later. So let's just double click the extract sequence here, and then we'll drag in the data extraction scope. And this activity, just like the other scope activities we've used in the Document Understanding project so far, needs a bunch of information, and I'm just going to fill out this information and speed up the video so you don't have to wait for me making a bunch of typos. So hang on 1 second. And then we need to create, of course, a variable to hold the extraction results. And I'll click in the field here and press Ctrl K, and I'll create a new variable called my extraction results. There we go. So now these values have basically been set. And just as we saw in the classification scope, we need to add not a classifier but an extractor to this activity. So we'll go to the toolbox and take the form extractor and drag it in and place it right here, and we can see that it needs a bit of information in order to work. The first bit of information is the address of an endpoint that the extractor needs to use. The second bit is the API key for our Document Understanding license. So I'll just get that and paste it in. There we go. And now it's still coming up with these warnings because it's not quite happy yet. What we need to do is we need to manage or create some templates. And basically what this is we take a sample document that is like the ones we want to extract data from, and then we show the extractor where in this document is the actual data located. So let's try and do that now. I'll click Manage Templates, and because we don't have any templates, we'll create a new one. Then we need to select the document type, and we only have one document type in our taxonomy so far, that is the invoice type. The template, I'll just give a name called my invoice template, again with a bunch of typos. There we go. And then we'll select the template document, and this is just a sample document that looks like the ones that we're going to want to extract data from. So I'll select one of my template documents here and select open. Then I'll change the language to English, and then I'll click configure. And now it shows us some instructions on how to create this template. I'll just click OK and tell you as we go along how we do this. Now what we have here is on the right side the sample document that I just selected. This is an invoice that might need processing later on. And this has, of course, the invoice number, the date, the vendor, and down here we see the invoice lines, what is it that we actually bought at some point. And if we look over here on the left, this is the list of fields that we defined inside our taxonomy. We have the invoice number, the invoice date, vendor, subtotal, tax, and total. Now one thing is missing over here. We don't have a field defined in our taxonomy for these lines right here. So let's actually exit the template manager and go back to our taxonomy manager and define a field to hold all of this data right here. I'll just close it, click cancel, click close, and then in the top menu bar here, I'll click my taxonomy manager. And this shows us the taxonomy manager. And in our taxonomy, we have UiPath company, we have the finance category, we have the invoice document type. And in the invoice document type, we have a number of fields, and we want to add another field. So I click the plus field button here, and we'll call the field invoice items. And the field type is not going to be a string or a number as the other fields that we have here. At the bottom here, we have a table field type. So we'll select that and click save. Now we go one level deeper because now we need to define the columns in that table. So I'll add a new column. I'll call it item description. That will be a text field. Let's just open an invoice just to see what it is we're dealing with here. So if we look at the table, we have an item description field, we have a quantity and a price per, and a total or line total over here at the end. So we'll add these three other fields as well. We'll save the item description field. We'll add another field and we'll call that quantity. That'll be a number. We'll save it. We'll add another field. We'll call it item price. And that'll be a number as well. Click save. And we'll add the final field and we'll call that line total. And that will be a number as well. And click save. So now we've defined the columns for this new table field. So we can just basically exit our taxonomy manager now. And now we're back in Studio. And if I now go back into the template manager and create a new template for this document type, the invoice document type, call it my invoice template. Select a sample document just as we did before. Change the language to English. Press configure. Then we should see on the left side inside of the template manager that now we actually have a field for the invoice items down here at the bottom. So the way it works is now we need to tell the template manager where are these fields located on the page. The first thing though we need to do is we need to convince the template manager or the extractor that we are, so to speak, on the right page in our document, because a document can have multiple pages, and in this case we don't, but we still need to identify the page as the one we want to extract data from. And the way you do that is by identifying or by marking a number of fields or items on a page. So we'll just add the invoice field up here, the date, the vendor, the tax. We'll also put client and notes and description. And you need to pick at least 5 unique items that will then be added to the page 1 matching info section here. So when I click plus here, then it now knows that we are actually dealing with an invoice. And then we can actually move forward and then define where is it going to find the invoice number, the date, and the vendor, and all of those things. So I'll just select the invoice number here, and then I'll click the plus sign here next to the invoice number field from our taxonomy. I'll click the invoice date and click the plus sign right next to the invoice date here. I'll select the vendor and click the plus sign next to the vendor. I will do the same for the subtotal here. I'll do it for the tax. I'll do it for the total. And then we get to the slightly trickier bit, which is the invoice items table. Now we have this table here with these 4 line items in them. If I click this button here, we'll actually be shown this table extraction tool. So we'll do that. I'll move this down just a little bit, zoom out just a little bit over here. And what I can then do is I can click right here and say I want to extract a new table. Then I can just mark up this table. And it's going to try and process it. And it identifies that this table looks like it has 4 columns. Then I will match these 4 columns by selecting a field from our taxonomy. And the first one is the item description. The next one was the quantity. The next one was the item price. And the final one was the line total field. I'm also going to say that I want to extract the header. And then I'm going to simply say save new table. I'll save and close. And then I'll save. And then we can just close the template manager here. And we can see that the little error icon disappeared from the Form Extractor, because now the Form Extractor has a template from which to extract data when it meets an invoice document. Now we need to configure the extractors as we did with the classifiers in the previous videos. So we'll click Configure Extractors, and let me just make this a little bit bigger. And what we can do is, if we expand the invoice type here, we can see all of the different fields and the table with its subcolumns listed here. And if we simply check the top box here and click Save, that means the extractor is actually configured now. Now what we do when we do this extraction is we save the extracted results into the My Extraction Results variable. We want to export from that variable into something a little bit more usable. And we do that by using the Export Extraction Results. So we'll drag in the Export Extraction Results activity. And as the extraction results value here, we will say My Extraction Results. And as the output, being the target variable to put this exported extraction results into, we'll need to create what's called a dataset. So I'll press Ctrl K and type in DS My Results. And what's a dataset? Maybe you are familiar with a data table, or you should be if you've been following some of my videos. And let me just give you a quick introduction to what a dataset is before we move on. So as I said, you're probably familiar with tables. A table usually has what are known as columns. These are stored in a collection of columns in the data table object. And each of the columns can have a name and a data type and a bunch of other properties. And when you add data to your table, it's added to what is called the rows collection. So a data table has 2 collections among a bunch of other properties. One is the columns collection, one is called the rows collection. And this is what we know as a data table. So far, so good. Now, what if we had another data table, for example, with countries in it? Now, as you can see, the country table has a country ID column and a name column. And the country ID column, funny enough, matches the country column from the first table that we had. Now, what a data set is, just to get back to that, is just as you have a collection of data rows and data columns inside of a data table, a data set has a collection of data tables. So you can have or store inside of a data set, you can actually store a subset of a database. In fact, a data set also has a collection of data relations. So you could actually have relations between the tables inside of a data set. And that enables you to navigate from one table to another. And of course, you can do that stuff with language integrated query or LINQ, as most of you probably know as well. But, you know, being an old man and this being a very old data type from the very first versions of the .NET framework, when I saw the dataset used in the extraction activity, I just got a little bit nostalgic, and I wanted to show you what is actually a dataset. And basically, it's a data type that can hold multiple data tables. So now you know, because this will be relevant in just a few seconds. Let's jump back into Studio. So we export our extraction results into this data set. What will that enable us to do? Well, let's just zoom out a little bit and then move our breakpoint here into the extract sequence. So now we're going to run the automation, and I'm going to select a document that I know holds more than one line item in the sort of invoice items section of the table. And then hopefully we'll be able to extract the data and see the data set result in it. So let's try and run it. So it's going to prompt us to select a document in just a second. There we go. And we'll select this one because I know that has, if we just double check, we have a number of line items in it. We'll click open. It's now going to digitize it, it's going to classify it, and it's going to try to extract the data. And in fact, it's already done with that. So if we go to the locals window here, where we can inspect the local variables, we should now have the DS_MyResults dataset. And if we expand that variable, we can see here that it has a tables collection down here. And if we expand that, that collection is going to have a count property of 4, meaning it holds 4 data tables. Now, if we just look at this property right here, we can see that the names of these data tables is simple fields formatted, invoice items, and invoice items formatted. And that means it basically has 2 copies of each of the relevant tables. And the simple fields tables here, they contain the simple fields that we defined inside our taxonomy, being the invoice number, the invoice date, the vendor name, and stuff like that. And then the invoice items tables will contain the line items that we saw in the table and extracted into the new table field that we created in the taxonomy. So what we can do now is we can actually stop this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little bit of code here that is going to actually save these 4 tables into an Excel workbook so we can actually look at them more visually. So I'll go to my toolbox and I'll simply do a simple for each. And I'll put that into my sequence here. And the first thing we'll do is, because we're dealing with a data table, we will change the type argument over here to a data table. And then for each of the tables, and I'll call that table in our DS_MyResults dataset tables collection, we will want to write that table into our Excel workbook. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a write range activity. And we'll call the file our results.xlsx. And for the sheet name of each of the sheets in the new workbook, we will use the table's table name property. And of course, the table that we want to save into that tab is going to be the table object that we have up here at the top. So with a little luck, we should, if we run this again, we should see in my desktop an Excel workbook containing 4 sheets, being the simple fields formatted, invoice items, and invoice items formatted sheets. So let's see if that works. Let's just double check on my desktop that we don't have anything, that we're not cheating. So let's just run this and see how things go. Again, we're going to be prompted for a file name. Like that, we'll select this one again, the one that we just saw before. Click open, and as it is processing, basically if we go to our desktop, we just saw it appear there. This is the our results workbook. Let's just stop the automation or let it run to the end. So far so good is my little message box. And then go to the our results workbook and see what it contains. It has, in fact, 4 sheets down here: the simple fields formatted, invoice items, and invoice items formatted. And if we look at the information, of course, and that's highly relevant, is that we actually did extract the data from our table. So we have the 3 line items here. Now the difference between the invoice items and the invoice items formatted, if we look at the invoice items tab down here, we can see that it is simply the raw text as extracted by the extractor. So it says 10.0 USD for the item price for food. And we can see that when we then purchased 15 food, that adds up to 150.0 USD. Now, in our taxonomy, we defined this, and, well, these 3 fields as numeric fields. So if we go to the formatted tab down here, we'll see the same data, but we'll see them formatted as numeric values according to the taxonomy that we defined earlier. So that's why it's important inside of your taxonomy that you define the fields as the proper data types, because when you do the extraction, you will get the proper data in a proper format. And that really helps you when you are going to further process this data. Now let's just jump back into Studio, because there's a couple of things that we're still missing, and I want to talk about that before we end this video. So what we've been doing so far, and this actually kind of sucks, is we've been building unattended automation, and that's fine, but a lot of document processing automations will largely be unattended automation because the volume typically is very high. What we're going to do in the next video is we're going to use all of these activities in conjunction with an unattended automation. And in order to do that, we are going to use Action Center, because Action Center will then send an action to a user whenever it's relevant. Whenever, for example, the automation has a problem classifying a document, it will send a classification action, and the same with validation. And we're going to wrap that whole scenario inside the framework for document understanding. And that's a framework that makes it very easy to build a solution that takes advantage of all of the aspects of document understanding and all of the tools and activities. And it will also let you build both attended and unattended automations. Hopefully it won't be too long before that video comes out. If you want to be sure you get a notification, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the little notification bell so you are notified when that video and other videos come out. And if you did like this video even just a little bit, it would really help my channel and me if you gave it a thumbs up. If you have any questions to this video, make sure you leave them in the comments below. And if you're reading through the comments and you have an answer to one of the questions, feel free to also reply to other users. We want to get a good dialogue going here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you stay safe and take care. And until the next video comes out, I just want to say thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.